welcome to all the participants and all the respected panel members who have joined us today in this Red Lantern Analytica's webinar on China's snooping threat over India. Recently, there was an article which was published by India Today magazine and which delved into the details and the danger of what India is facing right now, since the Chinese CCTV cameras have been deployed into various institutions of India, and this is not just limited to offices but has also been used in the military complexes as well. To discuss on this whole affair and how the CCTV can be used for snooping purposes, we'll be having a panel discussion today. And without wasting much time, I will introduce the moderator of this session. With us, we have the veteran Indian journalist, Mr. Vijay Kranti sir, who have worked in India Today, BBC, Voice of America, and various other institutions. He is a keen watcher of the Tibet-China-India triangle for past 48 years, and he is also a daredevil photographer who has traveled many times inside Tibet. He is also the chairman of Center of Himalayan Asia Studies and Engagement, and also has authored many books. I welcome you, sir, to this session, and now you can take ahead the thank you.
Thank you, Siddharth, and welcome everybody. And thanks for this kind introduction. And today we are, as Siddharth just now explained, going to discuss a subject which is very closely associated with the security of India, especially the security on the defense front. As he explained already, that India has been using, importing and installing hundreds of thousands of CCTV cameras imported from China. And there is nothing wrong in importing equipment from other countries. But something very special, as all of you are aware, with China is that nothing comes from there without a reason. And that reason is different from the financial and economic reasons. So these CCTV cameras, uh, they not only help the organizations who are using it, installing it and using it for their own purpose, for surveillance or organization, but at the same time, they are transporting online information to somewhere in China, to those institutions which are controlled by the Communist Party of China and the People's Liberation Army. So that is where the whole issue becomes very serious. And luckily, today we have a galaxy of experts who have studied this subject from their own angles. So we are going to have almost a 360-degree perspective of the whole issue. And today we will have experts from the industry who are very closely associated with these issues, these equipments which are used for surveillance, or equipment like the telecom equipment, and so many other kind of equipment. So in addition to those who are associated with the industry, we have an expert like Pradeep Sagar, who is a very senior journalist who has studied this whole issue from the national security perspective angle. We have Namrata Hasija, who is a very well-known expert on issues related to China, and she has been following China very closely on issues related to security and surveillance and the political aspects of it. And we have Mr. Ninong Ering, who is a senior political leader who has been minister at the center, who has been member of parliament, and who is currently a member of the Legislative Assembly of Arunachal Pradesh. And if I'm not missing any other names, we have Raghav Sharma also, who is vice chairman of the Video Security Surveillance Advisory Council of India, TEMA. And so this way, we are going to, if I missed, I'm sorry, I missed one very important name, Mr. NK, Professor NK Goyal, who is a senior telecom professional with a long experience of more than 4 decades into the telecom and IT industry. I'll give introduction to all these experts when their number comes to speak and make presentation. So right now I think it is time to start with the keynote address of Mr. Ninong Aring. As I explained already, he is a senior political leader. He has been minister at the center, a union minister of state for minority affairs, has been a member of parliament, and he is a mentor for the Red Lantern Analytica. And currently he is an MLA from Arunachal Pradesh. And one thing very special about him that he's one of those vigilant people who have been always concerned about the security of India, and especially in relations to China. So he is one of those persons who have been warning and informing the central government and other agencies about the designs of Chinese government, especially in context of CCTV cameras. So today we start with his keynote address. So may I request Mr. Ninong Aring to please deliver your keynote address. Please, sir.
Namaskar, everyone, and good evening. Thank you, Vijay. I'm really grateful to Mr. Pradeep Sagarji, so he is with us this evening. Uh, Let me be very frank. I've always been China, let it be the PUBG, let it be mobiles or apps, always warned on. This time, I'm grateful to Pradeep ji that I saw it after, and already there were issues along the Indo-China border. So especially even in the ships and all, when we heard in the Navy that they were using the CCTV in their defense force. That's a very dangerous thing, at least as far as I know, because China has a good record of saying Hindi, Chini, bye bye, and suddenly they start attacking the United States. They try to make very good friends. We have G20 meet here, and suddenly they said you will be attacking Tawang, in the Punjab district, Assam, this place. So they always come and interrupt and disturb our
Nirang sir,
people. Yeah.
pardon, Nirang sir, I'm sorry, but you're not audible properly. So there's some issue with your connection. We can't hear you.
No.
Your
Maybe
voice is
one
giving a
reason
problem.
is that you are connected double. There are two connections.
Yes,
Oh, sorry.
that also we couldn't
Maybe
hear you.
one, if you can stop, it should become better and
Yeah,
you will get better bandwidth.
I'll just.
maybe right.
Yeah, there are two connections right now active. I can
Yeah, I
see.
can also see two connections, right? So
So I'm.
Yeah, just please close one of them and it should be really good then.
Some issue.
Maybe one is a mobile and other is your laptop or something.
Yeah, I'll just. Big issue. I'm sorry.
No, 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 it's okay. It can happen.
I'm trying both, but they're not good. I'm not an expert in it.
No, sir, if you are using laptop, then the best is you switch off your mobile because the
Yeah.
entire bandwidth will come to your that single connection.
That is good. Switch off the. but it's still there.
You need to log out. I think Siddhartha can do. Siddhartha, can you log out, sir, from two connections? Sir? I think that would be better. Siddhartha,
Okay, sir. Yes, sir.
you can try
Can
from
you
your
log me out in the
end.
other one?
Log him from.
No, no.
I've done it, sir. I've done it, sir. So now
Can you
there is
hear me?
one connection of Ninong, sir.
Yes,
Please
sir,
go
you can
ahead, sir.
start.
Yes, sir. Now you can actually, sir. Please, sir.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Oh, very well now.
Okay. So the issue was that China has always, claimed Arunachal as part of China. And not only that, even you can see the issues taken up by the senators in the United States saying that should we, declare Arunachal as part of India? We are part of India. My minister concerned, Mr. Kiran Rijiju, is our law and justice minister. I was in the union cabinet. My late father dying hearing was in the 1962. He was in the cabinet of Madam Indira Gandhi ji. So when we hear that the United States is trying to say that Arunachal is part of India, and the BBC says that Tawang is a part of China. So these issues, when we hear, now we feel very demoralized. And we feel depressed also. But now let us come back to my friend Pradeep ji. I'm really grateful to him that he could really, give us a clear picture of what was going on. And just recently, Honorable Minister Telecom also has said that, especially in these our defense installations, the use of Chinese mobiles also should not be there because, like all of you know, that a lot of feedbacks are going back to China, which is a really security threat for us. So this evening, I would really like to hear from all of you because all the experts are there. I am just a layman. I may be a politician, I may be an experienced politician, but frankly speaking, in these issues, it is just from hearsay I hear, or from the media here, or when you all give me the feedbacks, especially Red Lantern, and it is doing a very good job. It always give me the feedbacks of what's going around here. We wouldn't like another Tawang issue, or we wouldn't want another Galwan issue. So we try our best that, okay, China, when they say that they have their imports and exports, you'll find that China is doing a business of more than, uh, you know, uh, 1 lakh, not 1 lakh, but some billion crores. So I don't know the exact figure, but China is at loss, not me. So if they all try these things using the mobile phones, using the CCTVs or other gadgets, which are very dangerous for us, I think it's about time the Indian government also should take it seriously. ठीक है, Chinese का सामान जो है बहुत सस्ते में मिल जाता है, लेकिन वो सस्ता चीज हमारे लिए भविष्य में हमारे लिए बहुत खराब हो. I think that should be my keynote, and I would like to hear all your discussions because that's what I'm here for. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ninong, for giving us the direction. And as you already mentioned, name of Mr. Pradeep Sagar, and we are all are aware of the interest he has taken in this subject, and quite extensively he has written on this issue in India Today. So I think he's the right person to be with us and make a presentation about of this issue. So now the floor is with Mr. Pradeep Sagar. As we already mentioned, he is a senior journalist working right now as a senior editor with India Today. Earlier, he has been with many prominent news media organizations. So, Mr. Pradeep Sagar, please.
Yeah, thank you, Vijay sir. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for inviting me for such a event which is very close to my heart. As a defense journalist, I've been following China for last 15 years. Yes, Vijay sir rightly pointed out before the India Today, I was with the Week, then the Indian Express, then DNA, the multiple newspapers. My journey is like over 2 decades, and for the last 15 years also, I've been tracking defense. So defense is my forte, it's my bread and butter, I would rather say. So right? And I must say, you brought out such an important issue, and the cover story which I have done on snooping, which I've been working on for many days. In fact, it took me so much time to convince my editors, my colleagues. This is an important story. Of course, they were in fact from the beginning they were sure it's a story. It's a story to be done, but it is such a technical thing. People were taking so much of time to understand how how China was snooping in it. So I'll just begin with the point. Like, hello, am I audible, sir?
Oh, yes, yes, you are
Yeah.
Yes,
quite
sir,
Like
you are
clear.
China,
audible.
China, we have been tracking. We all defense journalists have been tracking development of China, especially after what happened in May 2020 in Pangong So, the Eastern Ladakh. So then all eyes are on China. In fact, earlier our policymakers, especially the military guys, they were too much focused towards Pakistan, and we were ignoring China. So all our military assets were towards Pakistan. We never bothered to look at China. That the sudden realization after 2020 that we have to make the additional deployment, all sorts of military platforms were put in place. In fact, so China has been on the forefront for the last 2.5 years, especially in all the military cycles, and we have been tracking the developments on the military negotiations, whatever on the friction points, the standoff points. Out of seven, we have been able to finalize five, but still 2 points are still yet to be resolved, like Demchok one, and the another is Depsang. So there are 2 points are still yet to be resolved. So China, so the military negotiations is going on on the Ladakh sector. In fact, when I started my story with the point when our military generals, the lieutenant generals, they were talking each other to resolve the negotiations. The PLA army were at a different game altogether. They tried to block the power supply in eastern Ladakh by making an attempt to a cyber attack by getting access to through the CCTVs. Although Indian government we managed to thwart that attempt, but it shows the double intent of China. How China at the one side, Chinese military generals, they were shaking hands with the Indian generals to resolve the issue, but on the other side, the Chinese were doing something else. So primarily, it all happens after, I think, to my understanding, it all happens after Xi Jinping took over in 2012, and especially 2014. I still remember when I quote him when he declared that there's no national security without cyber security. So this is what the motto of Xi Jinping. So soon after, he brought out that law of the Chinese national intelligence law, which clearly says in 2017, if I remember correctly, which clearly says all the companies those who are working anywhere in the world, they are supposed to share information with the establishment, with the PLA or maybe the CPC. In fact, while doing the story, I spoke to Lieutenant General Pant, who is the National Cybersecurity Coordinator for the Indian government, who works under the PMO basically. He's the highest man when it comes to the cybersecurity in the government establishment. He told me very clearly, Pradeep, nowadays there's no need to send spies on ground. These the CCTV can easily be eyes and ears for Chinese to do so. And then it gave me a punch, okay, to lead my story. Although my story is not about the mongering, okay, this is what is happening, but it is all the China, it's all the double game basically about the Chinese military. So in fact, while working on the story, I got in touch with another senior guy in the establishment who told me very clearly, even during Doklam in 2017, this issue of the Tibetan, oh sorry, the Chinese attempt at the power power grid, the Ladakh power grid, they can be taken over, was pointed out towards the National Security Advisor Office. It was the issue was flagged at the time also, but as usually, we were. It's not that we were not looking at it, but we didn't pay too much of attention to that much. So then later on, I came across an internal note by the Ministry of Defense, which talked about extensively about how the China is snooping to Indian establishment, especially the defense establishment and the government establishment through the web of CCTV cameras. So through the web of CCTV camera and establishment. So I'm not getting into too much technicalities on how they were snooping it, but just a one point. It's basically through this is called the system on chip. It is the brain of any CCTV, and as per the Chinese law, it's all connected with the server based in China. So so it's all it was very easy for the China to get access to all the what's happening in Indian places. And the Chinese, in fact, I've mentioned in my story, there are 2 million cameras in India overall. And in fact, in the parliament reply itself, the minister himself has said there are 1 million are there in the government establishment itself, and majority of them are China. Although he did not name China, he said it's a Chinese made company, but he did not name it's a threat. But he said it's a threat to the national security. So, although after the Galwan, what happened? We all know what happened in Galwan in June 2020. Indian government banned multiple Chinese apps in the name citing the national security. But none of them bother to look at look at the CCTV, the surveillance devices. What these are? What these eyes? Basically, these fly on the wall were doing. Nobody, in fact, because there is no nodal agency which looks at at this particular surveillance device section. And but in fact, somebody told me very clearly. In fact, one of the guys, like, the banning Chinese product is not is only a political step. We need to check the backdoor entry of the Chinese surveillance system. That is the main thing that we that the and probably the absence of our data protection law, which is still pending. So that also added to the situation. And in fact, any snooping is nothing new. In fact, I still remember when I was at the Indian Express in 2014, I had done a story when the Air Force has come out with the advisory that the Chinese mobile Xiaomi, the company which was making inroads in Indian market, we should all the Air Force guys. In fact, since it was an Air Force advisory, so they made it very clear that Air Force officials and their family members, they should not use this Xiaomi company mobile phones. So it all created so much of hangama. In fact, the Xiaomi guys were after after me. No, sir, it is not the case. In fact, they made multiple representation to the Indian Air Force and the Ministry of Defense, saying no, we are not China now. We are making it in India only. In fact, they are now they are forced to make things in India. But still, you all know it's all Chinese. So and in fact, surprisingly, that reminds me that even the last week only, sorry, the military intelligence, our Indian Army's military intelligence, come out with a note, with an internal note also, which says, we chalked out some 10 or 12 Chinese mobile companies. We should discourage our people to use the Chinese. So it is the China threat, the snooping, it's all there in our mind. But we are still not been able to make it how to tackle the situation. In fact, the Chinese, the when it comes to this surveillance camera, it was the West who first raised the alarm. First, the US government did so. Then the UK government came out. The US government, the Trump government came out with the law against the surveillance camera, the Hikvision camera, and the Dahua, the two companies which are dominating in the market. So they were banned by the US law. Then subsequently in 2022, yeah, 2022, the UK government has banned it, and now last month only the Australia has come out with the ban. But we, despite raising the issue at multiple platforms, we have not been able to tackle the Chinese thing. In fact, officially we have banned it. No Chinese cameras can come to India, but still they are making inroads. In fact, we have panelists who can talk about who can talk from the industry perspective how these cameras are making backdoor entry into the Indian market. So the Chinese spy game is all over there. In fact, in December we all know the Chinese spaceship, the Wangyang, which was there, which was docked at the Hambantota in December, and it all created. We did our best to stop them from docking, but we could not do. Eventually, the vessel was there, and we had to delay our missile firing. So because of that, because the tracking ship was there, and now the recent the balloon episode, we all are be hearing the Chinese balloon all over the US. So it is the so China has been there for the snooping thing, and we need to get a strong law. In my opinion, we need to have a strong law to to prevent the backdoor entry of this Chinese thing. This is what I want to convey, and that's it from my side. If there is any query, I'm happy to answer if I could. Yeah.
Thank you, Pradeep. You know, this is what we really were looking forward to. The way you have explained the seriousness of the presence of Chinese snooping equipment and practically our inability to handle it. There are, of course, there have been many laws and many regulations to control it, but there are so many ways. The same thing can come via Singapore or through any other country. Yeah, this is a problem, and but one thing is good that now we are becoming aware of this issue, and people like you, experts like you, have made it happen. Thank you very much for that. So now I will request Professor N.K. Goyal, who is a senior telecom professional with a long experience of more than 40 years, I would say 43 years to be exact, in the telecom and IT industry. He is president of CMAI, the Association of India, which is integrated professional registered association about mobiles, the telecom, ICT, education, cybersecurity, communications, multimedia. And Mr. Goel has experience of this field. So I'm sure his inputs are going to make us further rich and more aware of the seriousness of this problem. So may I request Professor N.K. Goel to please make your presentation.
Sorry for interrupting, sir. I think that Professor Goyal is traveling right now, so
Oh,
he might be joining a bit late. Till then, we can have the address of Namrata Hasija, ma'am, if
oh
that's
yeah,
okay.
yeah. Oh, then it's okay. We
Thank
will
you.
wait for Professor Goel, and in the meanwhile, another
So if
expert.
you allow me, actually Professor Goel is on in transit to Geneva, and he asked me to speak on his behalf. If it's okay, I would like to speak on a few. Am I clearly audible?
Yeah, we need a little more clarity. Here we have Mr. Raghav Sharma, who will be speaking, filling up for Professor Goel. Yes, please.
Yes, sir. Just a bit of a background. Under TIMA, the Video Security Surveillance Advisory Council of India has been representing these facts for the last 6 to 7 years regarding the installations and the threats of these Chinese cameras, and even prepared the research report regarding the law passed in 2017 regarding the all the data legally being transferred to the Chinese intelligence. Unlike WhatsApp or Apple, which refuse to share information with their respective governments or our government, Chinese company doesn't have that option. Based on these representations, of course, after the Galwan in July 23rd, 2020, the GFR Rule 1411 was passed, where the countries sharing land border, the goods were not allowed. However, the overnight, all the Chinese companies became made in India, and everything sort of became made in India. And obviously, most of us are aware that all the components come from China and are sometimes assembled and sometimes not even assembled, just the entire package is coming and being sold as made in India with innovative accounting. The Now I want to actually focus on the solution part of it. I believe most of us are quite well aware of the threats. The solution, luckily, is already with us. If you permit me a few minutes, so the Indian Railways has almost ideally implemented it. Uh, uh, in the Indian Railways, these specifications are formed by RDSO, which is the Research Design Standards Organizations of the Indian Railways. And in that, they have put in a couple of key points which ensure that the components are not from China. One of them is an MTBF report. Now, MTBF is a mean time between failure. Any hardware manufacturer, you could say Apple, Samsung, anybody making a computer, any hardware device would have this particular test in which you run it, and whichever component would fail the first would determine the life of the entire equipment. Now, what happens is when you press a button, an entire software generated report comes, and you know the entire component breakup of the product. Till last year, this apparatus was not even available in India, which clearly proves that IT camera is never been in the country. For more than 50 so you have the entire of every component, capacitor, resistor, SOC, chipset, everything. When you click on that, you can go to the country of origin. So anybody who's claiming a local content, if they match their invoices and customs and all the import invoices and this MTBF report, then the actual local content can be calculated. More importantly, if the department asks for this, most of the people with the false claims will not submit any false claims of local content. That is one critical point. And the second point, which completely seals it, is the security audit. A cert dot in laboratories are there. Keltron has already started certifying certain companies. A Korean company has already got this security audit clearance of OWASP level 2. That is the clearance which ensures that there is no vulnerability of the equipment and data is not being transmitted to a third party device. Just the implementation of these 2 points, like it has been if it is implemented in the BIS specification, which is mandatory for every CCTV in the country to be sold. If you implement these 2 points in the BIS specification, this entire issue of Chinese CCTV is taken care of immediately. So that's the point I wanted to emphasize on, and I'm free to take any questions regarding this.
Uh, Thank you, Mr. Raghav Sharma. It's a very significant point, especially for people like me uh, who are concerned about this issue, but we have been always looking for, after all, if there is a problem, what is the solution? And these two steps which you have mentioned, uh, I very much hope that those people sitting in the decision-making seats, they are going to take it quite seriously. So thank you
I'm
very
so
much.
sorry, I did forget one more point.
Ji.
Um, that the railways, the only mistake they made was that instead of asking for these points with the submission of tender, they asked for it at a later stage. So some of the Chinese companies still ended up participating, but you will not believe that this is another myth that the non-Chinese solution turned out to be almost 40% cheaper than the Chinese. Because what happens is the tender was well defined. Now, this is another very interesting thing that our country is spending almost 3 times in the IT equipment because the Chinese cameras, although per piece might be cheaper, but they consume 3 to 5 times more processing power and up to 10 times less cameras like in American cameras. So when you actually take the project as a whole, your project turns out 300 times, 300% more expensive. But the entire IT sector is actually promoting it because HP, Dell, Cisco, all the switches, all their sales are going up by 3 times or 5 times because they're selling equipment which is actually not required. You are taking a 15 lakh rupee server, whereas in the railways, a 75,000 rupees same server is doing the facial recognition and artificial intelligence with a non-Chinese camera.
Oh, that's
So
interesting.
this is another key point I wanted to make.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And I hope
Yeah.
if
I'm
Raghav
sorry, I can
Sharma is
keep going
aware,
on, so I'll just try to be quiet.
thank you very much. So let us
Yeah.
hope if Raghav Sharma is aware of it, the decision maker in the defense ministry and other places are also aware of it. If they are not aware, let us hope they will take note of it. So thank you very much, Mr. Raghav Sharma. And now we are coming to our very learned speaker, Namrata Hasija, who is a very well known expert on issues related to China. She is a research associate with the Center for China Analysis and Strategy. And before joining CCAS, she has been a research senior research officer at the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies. She has been a visiting researcher at the Institute of International Relations, National Chengchi University, Taipei. And we have been reading quite frequently. Surely, people like me have been reading her very frequently on various issues related to China, and especially on issues related to China and Taiwan. She is a very keen observer. So we are happy that Namrata is today with us. So, Namrata, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your kind words. And I would like to thank the organizers for organizing this conference, because I think it's a very important subject that till recently was actually not being discussed at forums like this. And I think the awareness has increased, which is very nice. But for me, I am not an industry expert. Basically, of course, I'm a researcher and I focus more on geopolitical issues. So for me, I will not look at this in these the snooping incidents or the way China is into the cyber warfare very in isolation. For me, I am going to combine it with how the Chinese are also doing their influence operations, especially in India and the region around. Of course, they are doing it on a worldwide scale, but as we are focusing on India, so I'm going to, of course, combine it with the influence operations that they are doing, because we also have to understand that the Chinese have very, very strong lobbies, be it our business lobby, be it academicians, think tanks, journalists, uh, and of course, industry. Like, they have created niche lobbies and within the system, which is also very important for us to understand. So let me just give you a very brief introduction to how this how the military dimension to China's interest in cyber technology happened. Of course, now it is also there in China's military doctrine. So I think from the starting point, major military doctrine was published in 1999 by two PLA senior colonels, which is Chao Liang and Xiaohui. So both of them actually published a military doctrine, which was called unrestricted warfare. And unrestricted warfare, they spoke about how the cyber warfare that they are going to plan will have no rules. Okay, so this book was actually published, and both this senior colonels in the Chinese PLA wrote it. And of course, Chao Liang, that I just mentioned, he gradually became a lieutenant general. So of course, he was rewarded for this cyber warfare doctrine that he came up with. And this Chao Liang, he writes in his book, the first principle of such warfare, that is cyber warfare, is that there are no rules and no limitations. Now, this is, of course, then during Hu Jintao's period, because I know the general perception now is that everything has happened after Xi Jinping took over, but that's not the case. Let me tell you, it all started, in fact, with Deng Xiaoping's modernization, when he started modernizing the PLA army. And the major seeds were actually laid during the Hu Jintao era, because you also see in India, it is at that point of time that Huawei and ZTE are the most active when it comes to the hardware industry. And a very close relative used to work in Huawei at that point of time. So he told me that all the projects, because he was the head of the Telangana, of course now Telangana, but at that point of time Andhra Pradesh region, all the BSNL projects were with Huawei. So all the hardware that was there in the BSNL projects was all Huawei. And when Huawei and ZTE were actually banned, he told me that what Huawei did was to make sister companies. So it's like an Indian, of course, that's where I will talk about the influence operations and how important it is. It's like an Indian who will open a company, Indian company, because in the, whenever you give a tender, the tender is not supposed to go to Huawei. So it would go to these sister companies because they already have influence and good influence in different sections of our, administration. The contract will go to the sister company that Huawei has made. Of course, uh, when you work on influence operation, then you see the links. Otherwise, to a normal person there are no links, and the contracts used to go to these sister companies, of course, and then the equipment used to come from Huawei. This is in early 2000s, that it started. So that is why, for us to say that everything started in 2014 is not the case. In fact, Hu Jintao, in 2007, that he said that the armed forces should focus on information warfare. And China's defense white paper in 2009 also highlighted that how information warfare is the goal of the armed forces, along with integrated joint operations. So this all comes down to this. And let me tell you that Chengdu, which is the military region, which comes under the Western Theater Command, that is responsible for any action that any military action against India. At Chengdu, they were training what they call as cyber warriors. At the university, they were training the warriors. And in exclusively 80,000 hackers are just devoted to kind of for India and His Holiness the Dalai Lama's office. 80,000 just for us. So, these cyber warfares were getting trained in Chengdu University. There was a special course that was designed for them. And, PLA used to send their officers to be trained there. So so let us, understand the extent of this. And even now, the recent NPC, which is still going on, it's not been concluded. Xi Jinping has focused when he met the PLA officers and the PAP, that is the People's Armed Police, when he met their delegation. The most important point that he told them was that focus on science and technology. That is going to be our key in the future if we have to win wars. And and you also have to, like when the 20th Party Congress concluded in October, then also the focus was the Central Committee, which is from where most of the Politburo standing, which is like the Central Committee is the body, the most important body, from which you have the Politburo and Politburo Standing Committee. There, more than 34 out of 204 people were actually technocrats. So he has clearly given an indication that it's science and technology, and this, that they are going to focus. And here again, for them, cyber warfare is a very important point. Now, since 2015, when I come to the influence operation, let me give a some brief data. Since 2015, around 7 billion US dollars in Chinese funding have been vested in Indian tech sector. And I think that's something that we seriously have to think about. As of 2019, of the 100 most popular Android apps used in India, 44 were Chinese. It's only, of course, after Galwan that we banned the 59 Chinese app. But we have to understand that how these apps can actually influence our young generation. Whether you see UC browser, TikTok, or even Xiaomi. So if you open the maps on Xiaomi, it shows Arunachal Pradesh as part of China and not India. So slowly, we don't understand the seriousness of these little things, because we are just using UC browser. It will give you stories, it will give you updates on certain news items, and slowly your search engines are going to change, and they are going to basically direct you to a certain kind of news that these people of course want you to read. Now, another, I think, unchecked area which we don't talk about is the Chinese companies when they give under this corporate social responsibility scheme. Now, this is another avenue that needs to be really seriously thought about, because these companies, what they're doing is, see, if as an academician the Chinese really want me to work for them, they are very how do I say, very open about it. They in India, they are operating in a way that will shock us. They directly offer you cash, you know. And initially it was like institutions or like people of prominence, but now they will target academicians, simple academicians, maybe like me, simple journalists. There was a news when into 2020, after the Galwan Valley, when the Taiwanese National Day was celebrated in India, many actually journalists, they kind of had programs on television. Trust me, this is from a very this is from a reliable source that I'm saying. The Chinese actually called a few journalists. I can't name them, but they called a few journalists, and they told me and they told them that we have taken care of you for so many years. How can you have a program on Taiwan's National Day now? And there was a meeting in Delhi where the Chinese embassy here had sent someone to meet very prominent journalists in India, and they were asked that we'll give you 500 US dollar for every tweet that we send out. If you retweet that on Tibet or Hong Kong or Taiwan, we're going to give you 500 US dollars on every retweet. So this influence operation is something that, we don't focus how much, they are actually. So this CSR initiative is someone that they use their companies in India to pay either in cash or, you know I can also be a consultant to any company. Nobody's going to stop me. And if I'm paying tax on it, nobody will question me. But the problem is that this money is coming for a purpose, right? And CSR is being used for a purpose. And that is something that we have to focus on. Then, in fact, this the vice president and director of Xiaomi, when in India after the Galwan Valley, we had banned the apps and everything. They very blatantly they said that this boycott China thing is a mob mentality. Of course, they passed this comment. The Chinese ambassador, in fact, a very prominent Indian think tank gave the Chinese ambassador a platform to speak during the height of Galwan Valley incident, to put his viewpoint. If you see that video, you will realize what all he has said. So for me, these things, we of course here we are talking about the equipment and hardware and everything that is there. You can find solutions for that. The point is the influence that these people have in the IT industry, and of course at other avenues. Then Huawei, when they were doing the 5G projects in India, we all know who that is. A very prominent, person from one of our leading telecom industry. He said that this 5G from China we should take, otherwise we'll be left behind. And this 5G is way better than Europeans and other, what they're developing. Now, someone who's so strong in our industry, especially our telecom industry, vouching for the Chinese and saying that the 5G from Chinese should be taken, and we should not wait, or we should not go for the European or maybe other partners that we are developing, is something that we need to again understand. And everybody knows that Huawei, be it ZTE, all of them are linked to PLA. In fact, they have people, retired PLA officers or serving PLA officers on their board, and they advise Huawei, on many things. And in China, let's also understand that there's no private sector, because I have seen many Indian academicians and journalists writing that no, what we think about Huawei and ZTE, it's not their private sector. In China, there is no private sector. Let's be very clear. And we have seen various examples. Anyone who understands China even a little bit knows that there is no private sector in China. Now, then Huawei is directly, of course, like I said, controlled by the PLA. And according to a 2017 annual report, the Huawei group received a mix of conditional and unconditional government grant in China, totaling of 1,504 million yuan. So by the on 30 this thing 2017. Now also company operating in India was presumably found to be diverting all calls made from India via their server to China headquarters. I mean, because I'm talking about influence operation in India, I cannot name many things because I know this is going to be telecast, and you never know, what. But we have data. Okay, like these things are sure shot. It's not that I'm just saying because I'm participating in a seminar. So these things are there. Then ZT Telecom India Private Limited is another company that was working to set up 5G in India. Now, according to a reply by a Minister of State for Communication, Sanjay Dhotre, in Indian Parliament in September 2020, more than 44% of mobile network equipment of state-run BSNL is sourced from Chinese firm ZTE, and 9% is sourced from Huawei. So this is the state. Yeah, this is the state in 2020, and this is like we can see in the question answer thing in the parliament. It's there where he has given this answer. So this is 2020, the situation is there. So unless, of course, either we manufacture hardware or unless till the time we are not self reliant, we need to find different partners. There are options like Taiwan, like South Korea, like Japan. We can talk to them and we can have alternatives, because Taiwan is very good at hardware. In fact, we are good at software, they are good at hardware. Like, we can of course have collaborations with them, but these are things that we don't see through. Now, if BSNL equipment is more than 44% from ZTE and 9% from Huawei, so we know, I mean, there are back channels from which they can spy on us. Now, these are the very critical areas that these equipments are there. So at the time of war, they really don't have to send a huge army. They can actually, sitting in China, they can create problems for us. Now, that's the problem, because that's the problem that we don't think about. So these are the things that that's the future warfare that we see. Now, that's very important, because we are not initially we were not paying attention to it, but I'm glad now we are paying. Let me tell you how many companies: Big Basket, Daily Hunt, Helofy, Paytm Mall, Paytm.com, Snapdeal, Zomato, Byju's, Ola, Flipkart, Neo, Hike, MX Player, Pine Labs, Pocket FM, Swiggy, Udan, City Mall, Oyo Rickshaw that we have, Share Chat. All of them are being funded by the investors are from China. There are different sectors. Some are e-commerce, some are social networking, and there's a full list that we have of all the companies where the Chinese have invested. And this is not yes, we are being like I think has already been mentioned by Pradeep sir here, that the problem is, yes, we are banning apps, whatever. The problem is we don't have alternatives, and that's the problem. Now, if someone like me goes out to buy a phone, whenever I go, what are they showing me? Oppo, Vivo, that's all. Or OnePlus, all Chinese phones. So because I don't use Chinese phones, then I say, okay, give me a Samsung. We don't have an alternative. And we have to understand, like, someone maybe who uh, is not like really from a well-off family, if they're getting all the features for 5,000, why are they going to pay 15,000 for a Samsung phone? For them, this is not, Samsung is not an option. They'll buy a Xiaomi, they'll buy an Oppo. They are getting all the features in 5,000, you know. And we also have to understand that our data is also going in a way. The Chinese have all these things. So all these companies are being, of course, funded by the Chinese. Then, like I said, influence operations. Now, for the Indian business community to kind of entice them, I would say, Alibaba.com in 2020 they organized a online summit, Go Global 2020, Make in India, Sell Globally. So for MSMEs in India, so more than 2,200 export focused businesses from across India participated in this summit. So they don't stop just at this. They try to then make inroads individually. They will target the institution, they'll target individuals. So that is, and then the global forum of Alibaba Group's Shin Philanthropy Conference was held in India on 5th September 2018 under the theme of, imagine the theme, love and infinity, with an emphasis on education, child protection, and women empowerment. So these are also little things that we have to understand, that along with the major thing are these influence operations that we don't really focus on. And this is also something that the government should focus on. How they are making inroads in our own backyard. I mean, there are people here in India who of course are supporting the Chinese firms and everything. Now major Chinese firms operating in India like ByteDance, they too maintain a huge team of lawyers and policy experts. Okay. So they like TikTok, it was also accused of serious data breaches involving privacy intrusion. And the Chinese, actually, these companies didn't stop at that. Many of them had personal relations with a lot of Indian influencers on TikTok. So it's not just that TikTok is a Chinese app that you're using, but maybe I have 2 million or 3 million followers on TikTok. I'll be personally contacted by the Chinese firm and called for maybe lunch, called to visit China, and everything will be paid for. So I think, in short, I think I've over exceeded my time. I want to bring to a point that not only should we focus on the issues, the bigger issues, let us also you know really focus also on the influence operation and how China, because I have just spoken about the IT sector. Trust me, influence operations, especially under the United Front Work Department of China, the way they are in India, it's unimaginable. Just, we can't even imagine operating like this in China the way they are operating here. So I think this is one of the major issues that, because minister is here and so many influential people are here, I really wanted to bring this in focus, that we should also, other than this, we should look at the larger picture. Thank you.
Thank you, Namrata. Actually, I think most of us would agree with me. We didn't want to stop listening to you because your information is so striking. And I must say that at some stage, I wanted to raise a few issues which you have already raised, because I am in my own small capacity studying China for last 50 years and Tibet. I have realized this influencing business in India by China is so enormous that it is beyond our imagination. Recently, you have not named institutions. I am a journalist, so I have the courage. Maybe we do those things which people normally won't like to do. There are institutions in India who have been considered as the most respected sources of information and advice on China policy. And now we are suddenly realizing that they have been, not the institutions, but many individuals who were running those institutions have been feeding, eating out of Chinese hands. And so much so that one very respected institute, I will name it, Institute of Chinese Studies in Delhi. You know, this was, I think, started by Mirasena Bhattacharya at some stage. And the government of India finally realized that their research, although they talk of Institute of Chinese Studies, it was doing studies in the name of Chinese studies, which were more of interest to China than to India. And as a result, the ministry stopped their grant, the open grant. They told them simply, we will now grant you according to the projects. This is an indication how the Chinese have been able to influence. And I've been raising one issue. Although I'm moderator, I'm not supposed to talk too much. But one issue which I have realized, this influencing by China is not a recent phenomena. It has been going on since ages. One example was Meera Sinha Bhattacharya, one of the most respected China experts of India. So she was with Ministry of External Affairs, and she left that job to become a teacher in JNU. And the way she, when you, if you trace the whole history, the way she influenced the entire generations of India's China experts, you will be shocked. I call it Meera Sinha Bhattacharya syndrome, which a very big section of our foreign policy makers have been suffering from, because the way she influenced, and at the end we found that even very senior officers in the MEA, when talking of China, they would start thinking of China kya kahega. The moment you are raising an issue on China from India's interest, their first concern was, oh, let us not annoy China. And this is exactly that syndrome which has been dominating India's China policy makers, a big section of them, not all of them. We had wonderful people who for whom the India's interest was supreme, and they prevailed in many, many cases, but they could not prevail in many cases. So India's China policy has been under attack from China since decades. And unfortunately, we could never acknowledge it. We could never understand it. At one stage, if you remember, some of my colleagues would remember, late George Fernandez, when he was defense minister, he said that our India's number one enemy is China and not Pakistan. And the way he was hounded, it was, I observed it very closely. I was a fan, admirer of George Fernandez Sahab, and he pointed out. And now we are realizing, after so many decades, we are realizing what George Fernandez was saying was right. So now we are realizing China is the real concern for India, not Pakistan. So anyhow, thank you very much, Namrata, the way you have gone so deeply into how China is operating. Let us hope the policy makers, and especially those classes who are influencers, they would understand that if they are being taken for a ride for some money, some favors, I hope their conscience will wake up, and they will not fall prey to the Chinese propaganda. So thank you very much. Now we, because all our prominent speakers, they have already contributed. So mm, Siddharth, I think, is it time to open the floor for questions?
Yes, sir. We have some questions in the chat. So I'll be asking those questions, sir, if you can permit me.
Wonderful. Oh yeah, that will be really nice of you.
Sure.
Please do it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So we have our first question from that is there any way to easily find any non-Chinese IT infrastructure in a single web portal? So like he goes saying that right now we have to go through meticulously for the country of origin part of information whenever we shop from Amazon or Flipkart or we physically buy something. So is there any way, any place wherein we can visit and have some non-Chinese IT infrastructure easily? I think this can be answered by our IT experts who have joined us. Raghav sir can answer this question, I think. Raghav sir, if you can hear me, you can unmute yourself momentarily so that you can answer this question.
Yes, sir. So presently the portal does not exist. It's actually a very good question. It is whoever's asked it compliments, because and it should be, because the consumer presently goes on gem and has no clue what they're buying. They just get a stamping made in India or made in China or made in XYZ. So this is actually a perfect question, that how does the consumer know for a fact that what they're buying, where the origin is, and what is the guarantee, and which is the agency guaranteeing it? Which also gets me to the original point I was saying regarding the cert.in, that the cert.in itself would have to certify a portal like this. And what Dr. Rajesh Panji had already started, that when America made the negative list, India would do better. We will actually make a positive list of products and their components and positive list of companies. So if those registrations are possible on the National Cyber Security website, and you can register your products and your companies as positive companies, but that is restricted presently to the telecom sector. I believe we can spread it to a bigger sector of consumption for the Indian consumer. So was I able to answer that?
Oh, yes, I think you did. But of course, you left also a very big question also, that it has to be handled at a much wider level. Thank you. Yes, Siddharth, please.
Absolutely, undoubtedly.
Yeah, Siddharth, next question, please.
I hope I'm audible.
Yes, yes.
Uh, okay. So we can take the second question. And the question goes that there are many applications which have been a Chinese front for information warfare in India. Given the Indian expertise in IT, how long do we see that it will take us to isolate ourselves from this Chinese threat?
Hmm.
I think Namrata ma'am can answer on this because she has talked about this very fact during her address.
Then again, there are many applications which have a Chinese front for information warfare in India. In expertise in IT, how long? See, if you're asking me about the apps and all, of course we do have alternatives. The problem is that certain apps are already so popular, you know, that it's difficult for like we had so many alternatives. And now, let me give you an example. When the COVID started, most of our webinars used to be held on Zoom, which everyone knew. After this COVID, after Galwan Valley, everyone was using Zoom, though we had Indian alternatives for that, or at least other alternatives that we could use. We had Cisco, we had Google. Then there was one Indian app where somebody used, let me find the name of that app. But everybody was paying and using Zoom. So, there has to be also Zoom is very easy to use, let me tell you. Though I didn't use it, but my husband used to use it, because even though they had a thing from their head office not to use Zoom, their meetings were on Zoom only. Very easy to use, but the other apps that we were using were a bit complicated. That's beside the point. But the way, the Chinese go about their apps, I think we just lack that
Sorry,
thing
it's
where,
actually not besides the point. I'm interrupting you. You've
yeah,
raised a very good point. See, the app is designed through the artificial intelligence,
yeah,
which is collected based on the user interface. That user interface, which is monetary and can be monetized by our own government, is presently being monetized by Chinese. They are
true,
the ones who know the patterns of the consumption of our users.
yeah.
They are the ones who are running the algorithms, you are thinking like, what is it that the Indians need? Haven't you not noticed that why are the agarbattis and the murtis and everything started getting manufactured? Because the data is being collected, and through artificial intelligence, they are analyzing what is it that the public requires,
Yeah.
which is equally applicable to how efficiently an app can be developed.
Hmm.
Sorry, it was too tempting to interrupt you.
No, no, thank
Please
you. Because I
continue.
am not an industry expert, so certain things about these that you spoke about, I don't know. But for me, these things were very clear. That Zoom is like more, like user friendly. Because when he used to have meetings and I used to have meetings, I always used to struggle initially, when we had to. But theirs was like very this thing Zoom. So this, of course, whatever you said, it's difficult for a person like me to know. But thank you so much. I think.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Thank you. So Siddharth sir has little audio issue, so I would like to take up the next two questions. So, Shalini, ma'am, wrote about we have in this webinar come to know about active measures the CCP takes to spread propaganda in India. So much so that even mainstream media and think tanks and academicians can also be compromised. What can a normal person do to identify such propaganda? So any of
Should I
the
take this?
speakers can. Yeah, yeah, sure, ma'am. Go ahead.
Uh, it's so difficult. This is a very difficult question and a tricky question, but it's so also difficult to identify the propaganda. The thing is, like people like us who are studying it, sometimes we of course know who's been compromised, but we also know through the writings what they're writing. When the Belt and Road Initiative was there, and I still remember 2017 when the Belt and Road Forum was supposed to happen, you can easily identify from the writings. Prominent academicians, journalists, and all were writing how India has missed the bus and how we should have joined the Belt and Road Initiative. And trust me, few of them were getting the written thing from the head office, which is the other side of the road. Okay. And only their photograph and name was going. So you can see, sometimes it's difficult because I'll tell you that when I was talking to you about this Twitter thing, that if you retweet, you'll get 500 US dollars. Many of the people who went for the meeting actually had no idea. And initially, like somebody who attended that meeting told me that they also thought, what's the harm? Yeah, we'll get 500 US dollars, we'll just retweet. And then one of them, of course, was very close to me. And I was like, do you understand what you're doing? You are basically doing their propaganda in your country. you know Here we talk about Tibet, Hong Kong, Taiwan, or whatever, and what the Chinese are doing to us. But you are actually, what you're doing is you're propagating their own propaganda. And then it struck that person that, yeah, I mean, never realized that. We thought it's just a meeting, and what are they asking us, just to retweet what they are tweeting. I was like, but these things can also be against, work against the Indian government. So sometimes they're very open. If you go meet them, they'll offer you a trip to China with your spouse, with your family for 10 days, 15 days, and you'll be like, what's the harm? Like, but if somebody is paying your ticket, somebody is taking care of your hotel, somebody is, in fact, I met someone right now, and they said, at the end of the trip, they give you some cash, go for shopping. Okay. So now, and when you come back, they will, of course, ask you to write in favor of them, right? I mean, something you will have to give. Nothing is for free in this world, right? Somebody is taking care of your 15-day trip. There is an agenda. Either it will not be, they will not ask you immediately, but they are going to cultivate you. And over the period of time, you will also feel obliged, right? So sometimes it's easy, but sometimes it's difficult to, directly identify it. But for me, I think let's have more seminars or webinars like this where we educate people how they operate. What NGOs, Chinese NGOs are working in India. Now they are doing programs, joint programs with universities, with schools. They will never let you work on a theme that will be anti-China, right? So
Yeah.
these NGOs, like we need to create awareness also. Trust me, people in India, even at like really high post, they don't know what the United Front Work. So experts on China don't know what United Front Work Department is, what the offices are, what the
Mm.
branches are. How in Nepal, the Lumbini project that was happening was by a Chinese NGO, and many prominent Indians were on the board. They were being paid by the Chinese. And look, if you look at that project, I mean, thanks, it was like thwarted because many people in India raise their voice, but on the surface, it's very simple. You won't understand, but like I think we need to educate people about it more, how they
Mm.
work. Thank
May I add to what just now Namrata said? If you have if I have permission, uh, may I?
Go ahead, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. You know, I'm a journalist, and for last 50 years, I have been watching Tibet-China situation very closely. And few years means about 20 or 25 years ago, suddenly I discovered that the Chinese government was very keen to invite Indian journalists to Tibet and to China. These were those Chinese who, in their law, it is mentioned in the rules of visa that no journalist or diplomat can apply for visa for Tibet. If anybody wants to, should go directly to Beijing should apply directly to Beijing, not through their embassies. So such was a strong ban on it. And they suddenly started inviting Indian journalists. And I was also approached, but I people know me very well, what I think. So they didn't try too much on me. And then I discovered every year there were groups of Indian journalists who were being taken to Tibet in the name of Tibet. They were taken to Beijing, treated as nicely as Namrata just now explained. And then they were taken to Tibet on a conducted tour. And they were shown how, all the propaganda of China. And unfortunately, it was very shocking for me to discover that for initial few groups, the person who was working as China's main, I won't use the term agent, as the main, you know, coordinator was Mr. N. Ram, who is the chief editor of and owner of the Hindu newspaper. One of the richest newspapers, one of the best newspapers India produces. So the chief editor and the owner, N. Ram, was practically working as a tourist guide of these tour groups of journalists because he is a very well-known comrade. I don't want to go into those political sides, but he was the most convenient person for China. So the journalists would go through all that party, all that conducted tour and a paid tour, and they were fed with not only good food but also food for thought. So they would come out and write like Mr. N. Rami himself did in the Frontline magazine. I have forgotten. It was more than 20-page size article he had written, and everything was what just now Namrata said, that you have only to put your photo and name on that. So the whole propaganda was almost like the article was as if somebody has taken food and the Chinese food and vomited on the paper. So the entire article, such a huge article, was nothing other than Chinese propaganda, which I have been reading all these years. Similarly, what they would do, they would take. I will give one example in one tour, and Mr. N. Ram was the conductor of that tour. One of retired raw chiefs, he and one of the heads of one of very well-known think tank from New Delhi. They were taken on a conducted tour, and one of them wrote a big article before reaching India. How great was Tibet? How Tibetans are so happy under Chinese rule. How China has developed Tibet, and their beautiful malls, beautiful roads, beautiful cars, etc., etc. So when this gentleman came back, I called him and I asked him that I have read your article. He said, yes, yes, the Tibetans are so happy. Tibet is developed and China has done a great favor. You should ask your Dalai Lama to go and see. He will change his opinion about China. So I said, okay, I'll ask him. But before that, you just please tell me, can you, are you sure that the happy Chinese you saw, happy Tibetan you saw in a car or in a mall or in a big building in Tibet, in Lhasa, was not a Chinese? Can you distinguish between a Chinese and Tibetan face? Suddenly their answers, both of them, they said, oh, sorry, I think I will have to think again. They said, no, I can't distinguish between a Tibetan and a Chinese face. And still they were reproducing the Chinese propaganda saying that Tibetans are so happy. So I can only simply just I wanted to add to this that the Chinese propaganda is so sharp and so well calculated that even intelligent people, well-meaning people, the chief of Raw was not an idiot. He was not a person who would agree to be, that the Chinese can take ride over him. But they were taken by the Chinese propaganda so easily because they would do it so nicely in such a fine manner that even intelligent people would not understand it. So I just wanted to share that the Chinese propaganda is done in a very, very systematic and a very in a fine way. And I'm sure all of you have read about Sun Tzu. Sun Tzu, who was the expert of war, and his simple formula was that the best war is one which you win without fighting, because you go inside the house of the enemy and destroy his ability to fight against you, and then you win the war. This is exactly what, whether it is the telecom equipment, whether it is the think tanks in India, whether it is the research projects they are doing, whether whatever China projects in media they are doing, everything is focused at that. They want to defeat India without fighting the war, and by breaking the desire of India to fight for itself or to stand for itself. That is one of the biggest danger. And I think this telecom equipment is only one small part of that warfare.
Yes, sir. It was so enlightening that we gripped on your story. So the next question, Shalini, Siddharth. From many years, India is promoting Make in India. What change do we see in manufacturing of IT equipment in India? And how long till we see a Indian brand having a serious presence in the smartphone and peripherals domain? Yes, sir. Anyone can take this question.
It's actually kind of very easy for me to answer if it's okay.
Sure, sure. Go ahead, sir.
So it's a very simple. Presently, the Indian manufacturing situation when it comes to cameras or phones, they are very good companies with very good factories and very good setups, quality controls. What happens is when you manufacture a particular item, let's call it a phone, let's call it a 5,000 rupee phone or a 2,000 rupee camera. No matter what your landed cost in India might be, and no matter what your selling price might be, the Chinese government would subsidize that minus 20% through their local partner. And the local partner would get X amount of money per piece, irrespective of the selling price. And that they would continue doing that for 5 years, 10 years, it won't matter till the local industry doesn't exist anymore. So, till there is not a complete ban on them entering in every way possible, there will not be any incentive for a local person to actually start manufacturing. So the local manufacturers are actually importing, and they only hire people during the inspections and visits they have on their plants when 2,000 people appear. And on a normal day, there might be 50 people showing up for work who are only doing the packaging. So till you don't ban the import, the actual manufacturing cannot begin. And once you ban that, for example, in railway, the company which got the order has got such a big order that the Korean company is already thinking of setting up the manufacturing of 8 or 10 models in India. The requirement of the country is so big that everybody wants to be in the country. A very good example is Bosch. Bosch is a very known company, and when their camera was found to be installed at the office of NSA, and they said it was actually manufactured in Dhahua, Bosch did not deny it. They said, yes, we are a European company. The tender did not say we cannot manufacture in Shanghai. So it is manufactured in Dhaka. If you write in the tender, I cannot manufacture in Shanghai, I will not quote because my model is not competitive in the market. So the Bosch camera in India is actually manufactured in China. In NHAI, the company which has been supplying to Delhi Mumbai Expressway is Tyco. It's a Johnson Control company. Their BIS certificate says manufactured in Shanghai in the factory of Hikvision. So the issue is very simple. Unless until it's stopped, there's no incentive for the local manufacturer.
Yes, sir. I think that is absolutely true. So let's go to the next and last question. Karneet is
May,
asking.
may I add one point?
Yeah,
Am I
sure,
allowed to add?
sure,
Yeah.
sure.
No, no, what Mr. Raghav has said is very well said. Basically, in fact, when it comes to the basic point of from where we started this discussion about the surveillance devices, the surveillance camera. In fact, the US government, US in 2017, even after banning it, they're still struggling to find a replacement for them. They are still struggling. They don't have any measure to their own surveillance devices. In fact, so if a country like US is struggling, so then India, of course, we need time. We need time to. And the main point of this webinar is to give out some solution and some sort of a thing so that the food for thought for the policy makers that this is the alarming situation. We need to tackle the situation. And because, in fact, I said in the beginning, there's no nodal agency in India which deals with the surveillance devices, So it is just a basic thing. It shows the how serious we are about this situation.
So actually now, luckily there is, let me just add on to that.
Yeah.
So initially there was a confusion whether the surveillance devices belong to telecom or to MIT. But about 6, 8 months back, it has been clearly decided that surveillance cameras and CCTVs come under Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. That part is very clearly been finally segregated. Because till then there was a loophole and people didn't know which ministry to report to that the problem has happened. And you very well represented that point. So now the ministries have been quite well shortlisted. And so what America has done is they have taken out the NDAA, which is the National Defense Authorization Act, which prevents this. So in the government installations, they have already succeeded. Let me be very clear. In the last 2, 3 years, the American government has been completely and 100% successful in ensuring there is no Chinese device installed. And in India, so far, the Indian Railways has been successful. So just like NDAA, in India, we have the BIS. If we implement those measures in BIS, it is implemented pan-India for government as well as any consumption on the road. So that is a very significant tool we have in India. We simply need the certification agencies to be made more like sort of we have to make them aware that every product cannot be in a similar category. If you're giving a BIS certificate to a cycle or to a camera, you have to understand that there are certain devices which should come under national security. I think maybe the categorization under the national security of certain equipments might be the critical step.
Yes, sir.
True. Yeah, I understood.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely true. Let's go to the last question by Karneet. So technically, all the applications and products mentioned in this webinar have actively been advertising on prominent platforms in India, such as Vivo sponsorship of the IPL, among others. Do you believe that Indian government should impose regulations to limit their utility, especially in platforms which could sway millions of Indians? Yes, or anyone can go ahead.
Uh, Indian government should do it. The problem is, it's not that easy. We are a democracy, right? So when you are selling Vivo and Oppo phones in India, how can you stop Ranveer Singh from advertising for it, right? So it's very easy for us to say, that the Indian government should stop these people from advertising. But first, let's find alternatives. That's the question. Even in Bollywood, if you see, The Chinese have made inroads. In 2018, there was a this thing regulation of films and media that was handed over to the propaganda department of CCP. And after that, you see that there this Beijing International Film Festival that happened in 2019. Very prominent Indian filmmakers and actors were invited, including Kabir Khan, Shah Rukh Khan, and Amir Khan. Of course, has a huge fan following in China. For them, it's all about earning revenue, and it's not only Bollywood. You look at all the prominent US studios and production houses. Most of them are owned by the Chinese. You see how very subtly things are changing. Initially in US movies, who used to be the bad guy? The Russians. There came a time when the Chinese were the bad guys, but now if you see most of the, if a foreign bad guy is there, it's an Indian. You have to understand how subtly they do it. And in fact, there was a animated movie which was called Abonimal, if I'm not wrong. It was a animated movie for kids, which was banned in Philippines and Vietnam. Do you know why? Because in one of the scenes, the main like the cartoon character is looking at a map, and that map was promoting the nine dash line by the Chinese, right? So the again, I'll come to my point. The problem is we don't have the awareness. I mean, our prominent people, actors, directors, producers are going to China. They are co-producing movies. So, big budget movie, 100 crore movie, 50 crores coming from China. Who would not like that, right? But the problem is again lack of awareness. And what can the Indian government also do? They can't stop people say, "Oh, you don't." We are a democracy. There are flip pros and cons of both. So first is of course educating people about it, how they are doing it. So it's not that India is the only target. So the United Front Work Department, if I can say, it was called the magic weapon by Mao Zedong. So their aim, of course, initially was that internally to create an atmosphere that is pro the party, CCP. But now, of course, when everything was consolidated, the United Front Work Department is to create a pro CCP atmosphere across the globe. That's what they're doing. So it's easy for us to say, okay, yes, government should do it, but can they actually do it? Is the question. Thank you.
Mhm.
True, ma'am. Absolutely true. I think the economics and finance is dominating the actual data theft and security. So, yes, ma'am, for all the guest speakers and attendees, we must say today was an absolute enlightening session about India and China's affairs. All your crucial research and commentaries on the same made us ponder about our past and rethink about the future ties. It's true that as change is constant, the equations with our neighbors have changed and it's constantly changing. On behalf of our team, I would like to extend a warm vote of thanks to all the participants who attended our webinar today. We would like to express immense gratitude for the insightful thoughts that you have shared with us today. We have no doubt that the knowledge and ideas you shared will inspire rethinkers to discover this field more. We are indebted to our mentor, Ninong Iring sir, Pradeep R. Sagar from India Today magazine, Raghav Sharma from TEMA, Namrata Hasija ma'am from CCAS, and Vijay Kranti sir for his impeccable moderation. Last but not least, we would like to thank our RLA team who worked tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure that everything ran smoothly. Live tweets were written by the team while the webinar was on. Everyone can check on our Twitter handle and can follow for more updates on our Twitter, Instagram, and even on our website. Moreover, I would like to thank Abhishek sir, who is the founder of our RLA and encouraged us to conduct an event